7 years of marriage, 7 years untouched, a wedding night that ended with a devastating kiss and a closing door. She built a scandalous reputation. He became a ghost. But some secrets cannot remain buried forever, especially when a traitor is lurking, and the truth is about to explode like gunpowder. Welcome to another love story here on the Velvet Hearts Romances channel. If you love intense romances, passionate mysteries, and breathtaking plot twists, subscribe now, hit the bell icon and leave your like. Then tell me in the comments, which part of the world are you watching us from? Stay with me until the end, as this story will surprise you. The drawing room of Ravensholt House in Mayfair was too quiet for Rosalind Montrose, Marchioness of Ravensholt's taste. Silence was the enemy. Silence brought thoughts, and thoughts brought memories of things she preferred to bury beneath layers of extravagant silk and forced laughter. Rosalind, this must stop. Her brother's voice, Emery Davenhall, the Duke of Winthorpe, cut the air with the subtlety of an axe. He stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, brow furrowed in that expression that used to work when she was 16. Now, at 27, Rosalind merely arched a perfectly drawn eyebrow. What exactly needs to stop, Emery? My breathing, my existence. Be more specific, dear brother. He gestured vaguely, searching for words. Your public performance. Yesterday's party. Had fire-juggling performers. In the ballroom. Torches. Fire. Indoors. Rosalind examined her nails with exaggerated interest. It was a resounding success. Lady Ashford nearly fainted with excitement. Or perhaps it was the French champagne. Hard to say. Half of London believes you have lovers. Several, in fact. How fascinating. She smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. My life is even more exciting than I imagined. Too bad it is not true. It would at least be interesting. Emery sighed, defeated. This conversation had been repeated for months, years in fact. For God's sake, you are a married woman, Rosalind, a marchioness. Am I? Her voice came out sharper than she intended. Hard to remember, considering I haven't seen my husband in 7 years. 7 years, Emery. He kissed me like the world was ending, said, "Forgive me," and disappeared out the door. He never came back. So forgive me if I do not exactly feel married. The Duke opened his mouth, closed it, and finally shook his head. You are untamable. I inherited it from you. She rose in a fluid movement, her emerald green dress whispering against the floor. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a charity dinner to plan. I am thinking of hiring an Italian opera, or perhaps Venetian acrobats. I have not decided yet. Emery left, huffing something about family reputation and common sense. The door closed with a definitive click. Rosalind waited until she heard his boots descending the stairs. Only then did she allow the mask to drop. 7 years. 7 years since Henry Montrose, the Marquess of Ravensholt, her husband, technically, left her there, her lips still burning from that impossible kiss, and her heart silently shattered. 7 years manufacturing scandals because scandals filled the void. 7 years a virgin, but with the reputation of a courtesan. The irony was hilarious. If it were not utterly devastating, she wondered sometimes if Henry was dead, if he had fled to the continent with some mistress, if he simply found her so uninteresting that he preferred to disappear. None of those options were comforting. The door opened again, this time with the characteristic discretion of Cornelius Ashworth, the house butler, tall, grey-haired, with a military bearing he never explained, and eyes that seemed to see through people. Cornelius was one of the few constants in Rosalind's chaotic life. Impeccable, loyal, and disturbingly silent. The afternoon correspondence, milady. He placed the silver tray on the side table. Rosalind did not even turn around, but her voice was laced with sugary sarcasm. Any news from my most worthy husband, Mr. Ashworth? There was an almost imperceptible pause, then, regrettably, still none, milady. She laughed, a humorless sound. Still none. Rosalind finally turned to face him. Nothing changes, does it, Mr. Ashworth? His eyes met. Hers. There was something there. Knowledge, pity, secrets, but his expression remained as impassive as carved stone. Things do change, milady, just not always in the way or time we desire. It was the most cryptic answer he had ever given her. Rosalind frowned. Sometimes you speak like a Greek oracle, Mr. Ashworth. It is disconcerting. My apologies. He inclined his head slightly. Will you require anything further? Yes. Have the carriage prepared. I'm going out." Cornelius observed her with that disturbing, silent hauteur, as if he were calculating invisible risks, plotting escape routes, assessing threats she could not see. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, milady," and left as silently as he had arrived. Rosalind stood looking at the closed door, with the strange feeling that Cornelius knew something she did not. But that was ridiculous. Was it? About 500 miles north, in the icy waters of the North Sea, a man known there as Edward Langmore maintained his balance on the deck of the Albatross with the naturalness of someone who had spent years defying treacherous waves and merciless storms. "Langmore!" Captain Johannes Norwick yelled from the helm, his hoarse voice cutting through the salty wind. "I need you on the mainmast. Sail came loose, und I, Captain." He climbed with feline agility, muscles working beneath the soaked linen shirt. The wind whipped his dark red hair, longer now, dancing in the wind, and the reddish beard filling his jaw. His hands, calloused and strong, secured the rebellious sail with brutal efficiency. 7 years at sea did that to a man. They transformed, hardened, molded. Below, on the deck, the other sailors shouted instructions. He was respected there, not just for competence but for something more, a natural authority that no disguise could completely hide. All for the crown, all for the mission. The afternoon dragged on in mechanical tasks, repairing ropes, checking provisions, mapping routes, honest work that kept his hands busy and his mind relatively quiet. Relatively, because no matter how many sails he repaired or how many nautical knots he learned, she was always there, in the corners of his mind, in the silence between the waves, in the empty space beside him every night. Rosalind. When the ship's bell marked the end of the shift, he descended to the shared cabin. 2 other officers were already snoring in their hammocks. He ignored the bone-deep fatigue and went to the small cracked mirror hanging on the wooden wall. The face staring back at him was that of a stranger, dark red hair falling over blue eyes that were once gentle but now had sharp edges, a square jaw covered by a scruffy beard, a thin scar above his left eyebrow, courtesy of a tavern brawl in the port of Rotterdam 2 years ago. Who am I? The question haunted him lately, more than it should. Edward Langmore was a name, a role, a mask, so well worn that sometimes he forgot the face beneath, but then he thought of her, and he remembered. He remembered brown hair like melted chocolate falling in silky waves over delicate shoulders. He remembered blue eyes, not the soft blue of a summer sky, but the stormy blue of the sea before a tempest. Insolent, defiant, devastating. He remembered soft lips against his that single time, the only time he was allowed to touch her, to taste her sweetness, to feel her stolen breath against his mouth. And then he remembered closing the door, of leaving her behind, of choosing duty over desire. His fingers clenched around the edge of the makeshift sink, his knuckles white. How much longer? Urgent knocking on the door yanked him from the abyss of his own thoughts. "Langmore, delivery for you." He opened the door. A young cabin boy, his freckled face still marked by teenage acne, held out a sealed envelope. "Came with the supply boat from Newcastle, sir." Said it. Was urgent. Edward took the envelope. Heavy, black wax seal, not red. Black meant his blood ran cold. "Thank you. You can go." The boy left. He closed the door, trembling fingers breaking the seal. The paper inside was covered in symbols, numbers, scrambled letters, code. It took him 15 minutes to decipher, each second tightening the knot of dread in his stomach. When he finished, the words danced before him like a death sentence. Operation compromised. Identity exposed by internal traitor. Target confirmed. Lady Rosalind Montrose, Marchioness of Ravensholt. Imminent threat. Await orders. Do not return without authorization, or you will expose entire network. The paper slipped from his fingers. The world tilted. Rosalind, his Rosalind, in danger, and he was trapped here, hundreds of miles away, bound by orders, by duty, by secrets he could not reveal. 7 years, 7 years protecting her the only way he knew how, by staying away. And now, when he was finally close to completing the mission that had stolen her from him, a traitor threatened to destroy everything, threatened to destroy her. No, no. He turned to the mirror again. The stranger was still there, but underneath, Far beneath the beard, the scars, the years of lies, there was still a man who had made a promise. On his wedding night, with a kiss, with a husky whisper, "Forgive me," he had promised to return, and promises, even those made in silence, had power. Edward. Langmore might have to wait for orders, but Henry Montrose, Marquess of Ravensholt, had waited long enough. Now he was a desperate man, and desperate men were the most dangerous of all. 3 weeks later, London was buzzing with the social movements of the season. Lord Alistair Thorne had the kind of smile that made matrons sigh and debutantes blush. Perfectly groomed blonde hair, amber eyes, broad shoulders wrapped in impeccably tailored coats. He was everything a British gentleman should be. Charming, cultured, wealthy, and absolutely dangerous. But Rosalind did not know that when he approached her at Lady Pemberton's ball, a glass of champagne in hand and that practiced smile on his lips. "Lady Ravensholt," he bowed with studied elegance, "allow me to say that your entrance tonight was memorable." Rosalind arched an eyebrow. She wore a blood-red dress, scandalously daring by London standards, with golden embroidery that looked like flames climbing up the skirt. Her hair was pulled back in an elaborate updo, making her stand out from the crowd of noble women. Subtle was not her forte. Not anymore. Memorable is a charming euphemism for shocking, Lord Thorne, but I appreciate the courtesy. He chuckled, a warm, genuine sound, or one that sounded genuine. Shocking is tedious. Memorable is art. His eyes swept over her face with interest that seemed almost too intense. "And you, my dear, are a masterpiece. Cheap flattery." Rosalind had heard 1,000 versions of it over the past few years, but there was something about Alistair Thorne, the way he looked at her, as if she were a fascinating puzzle he intended to solve, that was different. Different did not mean welcome. "Flattery does not buy me, Lord Thorne. I do not intend to buy you, Lady Ravensholt." He took a step closer, his voice low enough to be intimate. "I intend to know you. There is a difference." "Is there?" But before she could answer, he was already moving away, leaving behind only the scent of his expensive cologne and an odd sensation of having been assessed with interest and lust. Rosalind shook her head. Imagination. It had to be. In the following days, Alistair Thorne appeared. A lot. At the opera, coincidentally, in the box next door. In the park, by chance, strolling when she was feeding the swans. At the bookstore where she bought her scandalous French novels, surprisingly interested in the same authors. He was attentive without being suffocating, witty without being arrogant, interested without being intrusive. He was too perfect. And Rosalind, despite being resentful and lonely, despite secretly liking the attention after 7 years of being invisible to the only man who mattered, could not surrender to the charade, because, and this was the pathetic truth she hated to admit, her stubborn heart still belonged to Henry Montrose, to the ghost who had left her, to the husband who had disappeared, to the man who had kissed her as if she were air and then simply vanished. Idiot, she thought, pathetic, sentimental idiot. But the heart was a stupid organ. It did not obey logic. "You seem distant, Lady Ravensholt." Thorne's voice brought her back to the present. They were at the art gallery, surrounded by Renaissance paintings she barely registered. "Forgive me, merely thinking of your husband?" The question was too bold. Rosalind turned sharply to face him. "Excuse me." Thorne did not seem embarrassed. On the contrary, there was something calculated in his golden eyes. "I am not blind, my dear. Half of London talks about the Marquess of Ravensholt who disappeared 7 years ago. And you," he tilted his head, "you use scandal as armor. But armor exists to protect wounds, does it not?" Rosalind felt her blood boil. Who did he think he was? "My private life is none of your concern, Lord Thorne." "No," he agreed easily. "But perhaps it should be. Perhaps you deserve someone who is here, someone who sees you, someone who will not abandon you." There was a promise in those words, and a trap. Rosalind knew it. She knew deep in her gut that something was wrong. But loneliness was a slow poison, and 7 years was enough time to poison anyone. "I will think about it," she said, her voice colder than she intended. "Now, if you will excuse me." "Naturally," he bowed. "But before you leave, and I have an invitation, a cultural trip to the North Coast, inspiring landscapes, sea air, excellent company. Several mutual acquaintances will be present. I would be honored if you accepted. Tempting, but something in Rosalind's stomach twisted. A warning, a premonition. Do not go. But her mouth answered before her prudence could intervene. When? His smile widened, triumphant. In 2 weeks. I will send the details. And then he was gone, leaving Rosalind alone among paintings of saints and martyrs, with the growing feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake. Are you enjoying the story? Do not forget to leave your like and comment. Do you think Rosalind will really embark on this trip? Ravensholt House, Butler's private office. The letter arrived via messenger at 3 in the morning. Cornelius Ashworth did not sleep anyway. The habit of decades was not easily broken. Black seal, no crest. Just 3 small dots in the wax. He opened it in silence, his eyes scanning the lines written in common ink, but with words that meant much more than they appeared. We inform you that the gentleman recently interested in Ravensholt House affairs has questionable dealings with associates from the continent. Extreme caution and redoubled vigilance are recommended. We advise urgent communication with the absent administrator of the estate. Situation requires immediate attention. No signature, never was. But Cornelius knew exactly who had sent it, and he knew what those carefully chosen words really said. Thorne is the enemy. Rosalind is in danger. Warn the Marquess. He folded the letter with precise movements and burned it in the desk candle, watching the dark ashes swirl before disappearing. 7 years. 7 years keeping vigil. 7 years of discreet reports, letters sent to addresses that changed every month, silences that cost more than words. And now, finally, the threat he had always suspected, but hoped never to see, materialized in the form of a charming lord with a calculated smile. Cornelius went to the desk and began to write. Not in code. Henry would know how to decipher between the lines. My lord, the situation in London requires your urgent attention. A certain gentleman, Lord Thorne, demonstrates improper interest in domestic matters. Lady Rosalind plans a trip to the north coast within 10 days, accompanied by the aforementioned gentleman. Immediate intervention is required. I will remain vigilant, but resources are limited. Awaiting instructions. CA. Brief. Discreet. But Henry would understand every unsaid word. Act. Before it is too late. He sealed the letter, called the most reliable messenger, a young man who had made this route dozens of times, and handed it over with precise instructions to the usual recipient. Maximum urgency. The boy nodded and disappeared into the London night. Cornelius returned to the window, watching the silent streets of Mayfair. Wherever the Marquess of Ravensholt was, whoever he pretended to be right now, he needed to return. Now. Twilight broke in the sky as the albatross slid toward the North Sea waters. The letter from Cornelius arrived 5 days after the first one. This time there were no codes. Henry read the letter 3 times. Every word was a live ember against his skin. 10 days. 10 days until Rosalind was taken somewhere isolated, vulnerable, at the mercy of a traitor who had already proven to be lethal. 10 days to complete a mission that had taken 7 years. Impossible. But when the alternative was to lose her, truly lose her, not just at a distance, but forever, impossible ceased to matter. He climbed onto the deck where Norwick checked maps under the dim light of a lamp. Captain, I need to speak with you. Private. Norwick looked up, recognizing the tone. My cabin. Now. Minutes later, doors closed. Henry faced the man who had commanded his disguise for years. I need to go to England, North Coast, urgently. Norwick frowned. Your mission, it is almost complete, but there are complications. He hesitated. How much to reveal? How much to trust? Personal complications, he said finally. Norwick's eyes narrowed. Then slowly understanding dawned. The wife. It was not a question. Henry did not answer. He did not need to. Norwick sighed. Long, tired. Langmore, or whoever you truly are, you are the best sailor who has ever served me, but I always knew you did not belong to the sea. He leaned forward. You belong to whoever is waiting for you ashore. Then will you help me? We will anchor on the north coast in 8 days, Norwick said, near Whitby, officially for repairs. Unofficially, he paused. You were never here. Gratitude burned in Henry's throat. Thank you, Captain. Just Norwick grabbed his arm. Be whoever you are, Langmore. Whatever. Your mission. Finish it. And go back to her. Life is too short to waste on empty seas. Henry nodded, his throat too tight for words. 8 days. 8 days until Rosalind reached the coast. 8 days to prepare for what could be an ambush, a confrontation, or a reunion. 8 days until he found out if 7 years of sacrifice had been worth it, or if he would arrive too late to save the only person who had always been worth saving. Meanwhile, in London, in the imposing Ravensholt house, Rosalind held Thorne's invitation between her fingers. Expensive paper, elegant handwriting. Rendezvous on the North Coast, Whitby. Accommodation at Thornfield Manor residence. Spectacular views. Select company. Something about it bothered her, but she could not define what. Cornelius entered the room silently. "Milady, about this trip. I have already made my decision, Mr. Ashworth." She cut him off, more defensive than she intended. "I will go. I am tired of this. Endless boredom and the loneliness of these finely ornamented walls." His eyes, always so controlled, flashed with something dangerously close to panic. "I do not think it is prudent, milady." "Since when does my prudence matter?" She laughed, bitter. "I am the scandalous Marchioness, remember. Ruined reputation, ghost husband, wasted life. Bring on the fun. What else can I lose?" "Everything," Cornelius thought. "You can lose everything." But he only said, "As you wish, milady," and left, already mentally composing the letter he would send to Henry. The letter that would say, "She will go. Be ready, or be prepared never to see her again." Because not every trip to the coast is innocent. Not every invitation is what it seems. And sometimes the greatest danger comes wrapped in charming smiles and seductive promises. The trip to the North Coast should have been boring, like everything else for Rosalind. Despite the constant search for extravagant distractions, nothing truly filled her as she wished. Something was always missing, or someone. Rosalind expected beautiful but monotonous landscapes, insipid conversations with well-meaning strangers, and perhaps, just perhaps, some temporary distraction from the loneliness that had been gnawing at her bones for 7 years. What she did not expect was to wake up with her head throbbing, her mouth dry as parchment, and the unmistakable smell of mold and salt water invading her nostrils. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the gloom. Rotting wood, rusty chains hanging from the walls, the constant sway beneath her feet. No, not a sway, a roll. She was on a ship. Her hands were tied in front of her body with rough ropes that had already left red marks on her wrists. Her travel dress, a perfectly suitable teal for coastal outings, was dirty, torn at the hem. Panic rose in her throat like bile, but Rosalind swallowed it with the strength of someone who had learned to survive abandonment with dignity intact, even if feigned. "Where in the blazes am I?" Her voice came out hoarse, but steady. No one answered. The ship's hold, because that was clearly what it was empty except for barrels stacked in a corner and rats running freely over damp planks. She pulled on the ropes, testing their resistance. Tight. Professional. Whoever had tied her knew what they were doing. The last thing she remembered was accepting a glass of wine from Alistair Thorne during the stop at the coastal inn. He had smiled seductively, that practiced smile that now in retrospect seemed utterly wrong, and said something about toasting new friendships. Idiot. She had been a complete idiot. Footsteps echoed on the deck above, rough voices in a language she could not fully identify, but which sounded vaguely French mixed with something harsher, Russian perhaps. The sound of boots descending a wooden ladder made her spine stiffen, preparing for what was to come. The door opened with a sharp creak. Silhouetted against the lamplight, a tall figure blocked the entrance. When he moved inside, allowing the faint light to illuminate his face, Rosalind felt her stomach drop. Alistair Thorne, but not the charming gentleman from London. This man had cold, calculating, cruelly amused eyes. "Lady Ravensholt, I hope you rested well." The journey was necessarily discreet. He approached with measured, predatory steps. Rosalind instinctively backed up until her back hit the damp wall of the hold. "What do you want from me?" She raised her chin, refusing to show the fear that threatened to choke her. "Want?" Thorne tilted his head, studying her like a collector evaluating a rare piece. "So many things, my dear, but mainly..." He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, with a touch that made her shiver with revulsion. "I want to show an extraordinary woman what it is like to be truly appreciated. Take your hands off me." The words came out like venom. He chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. 7 years, Rosalind. 7 years married and still untouched. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you react, like a flower that has never been plucked. His fingers slid from her chin to her neck, his thumb lightly pressing the accelerated pulse there. What a criminal waste. "My marriage and my husband are none of your concern." But her voice trembled, betraying her. "Ah, but that is precisely where you are mistaken." Thorne leaned in, his lips dangerously close to her ear. "Your husband is exactly my concern, and soon, when I am done with him, I will have the pleasure of demonstrating how a real man can drive a woman to the limits of reason, how I can make you forget him." His lips brushed her neck, almost but not quite, in a daring promise. Rosalind gasped, not from desire, but from fury mixed with visceral terror. She tried to push him away, but with her hands tied, she had no leverage. "You are disgusting, and you are magnificent when you are angry." He finally stepped back, leaving her panting against the wall. "Save that passion, my dear. You will soon have a use for it." He left, locking the door behind him, and Rosalind let out a strangled sob of impotent rage. Damn Thorne. Damn Henry for disappearing. Damn herself for being idiot enough to fall into that trap. What in God's name was going on? The hours dragged on in a claustrophobic eternity. Then, so suddenly that she almost thought she had imagined it, the entire ship shuddered. An explosion, shouts, the unmistakable sound of steel against steel echoing from the deck. Rosalind threw herself against the ropes with renewed urgency, but they would not budge. Long minutes passed, and only the sounds of fighting and chaos could be heard on deck. A creeping despair began to take hold of her. Then the door to the hold burst inward, literally ripped from its hinges, and through the smoking hole rushed armed men dressed like sailors, but moving like soldiers, organized, lethal, efficient, and at the head of them, covered in soot and the grime of battle, was a man who stole all the air from her lungs. He was immense, not just tall but built, broad shoulders strained beneath a torn linen shirt that revealed muscles sculpted by brutal labor. His hair, now longer, the beautiful dark red hue plastered to his forehead with sweat and seawater, a full beard framing a square jaw, a scar above his left eyebrow. This was a warrior, a man forged in violence and survival, but it was the eyes that destroyed her. Blue, impossible, his. "Henry?" The word came out like a broken prayer. He crossed the space between them like a storm, urgent, inevitable, dropping to his knees in front of her and pulling a knife from his boot to cut her ropes with movements that trembled at the edges. "Are you hurt? Tell me you are not hurt. Did he touch you?" The words tumbled out desperate. His hands, and so different, calloused, rough, strong, cupped her face with devastating tenderness. "Rosalind, look at me." She stared at him, really stared at him for the first time in 7 years, and it was like being struck by lightning. He was beautiful, not in the polished, refined way she remembered from their wedding, but in a raw, dangerous, absolutely masculine way. The way his eyes looked at her, as if she were water and he were dying of thirst in the desert. The way his jaw tightened as if he were fighting impulses that threatened to tear him apart. The way his hands trembled against her face, so gentle despite the brutal strength she had just witnessed. Her voice failed. He did not succeed. Something wild and primal passed through his eyes, relief so deep it bordered on physical pain. Thank God. Thank all the saints. He pressed his forehead against hers for a suspended heartbeat, his erratic breath warming her lips. So close. After so long, so impossible and devastatingly close. But then reality penetrated through the fog of shock and relief. This was Henry, the man who had abandoned her, the ghost who had haunted every day and night of the last 7 years. Rosalind abruptly pulled away, staggering as she got to her feet. "Do not touch me." He recoiled as if struck, but nodded, his jaw clenched. "Right, of course, but I need to get you out of here now. Can you walk?" "I can do everything myself. I have been doing so for the past 7 years. The words came out sharp as broken glass. He closed his eyes briefly, pain cutting across his features, but did not respond. He simply turned and began to guide her through the smoking chaos, maintaining a careful distance between their bodies, but constantly positioning himself between her and any potential danger. When they reached the deck, everything was pure. Chaos, fire crackling, men fighting, the smell of gunpowder and death thick in the salty air. Rosalind barely had time to process before 3 men, mercenaries by their mismatched attire and heavy weapons, blocked their path. Henry did not hesitate. In a fluid and brutal movement, he pulled her behind him, his body becoming a shield of flesh and muscle between her and the incoming blades. "Stay behind me." It was not a request. It was a growled command as he moved, with ruthless precision, disarming and dislodging threats. Rosalind should have been horrified, but something primitive and inconvenient in her could only focus on the cut of the muscles in his back beneath the marked shirt, the way he moved with deadly grace, the way he did not allow any of them to get within an inch of her. When the last man fell, Henry turned to check on her, his hands hovering but not touching, respecting her previous order, and their eyes met, charged, intense, burning with unspoken things. The boat. Now. He indicated the side where ropes hung toward a smaller vessel bobbing in the turbulent water. She nodded, allowing him to help her descend, and even through the urgency, even through the anger boiling in her veins, her traitorous body registered every touch, every accidental brush of fingers against skin, every solid muscle that supported her when her feet slipped on the wet ropes. It was only when they reached solid ground, wet sand beneath their trembling feet, rowing furiously toward the shore as the burning ship fell behind, that she saw a figure on the ruined deck, blonde hair illuminated by the fire, Alistair Thorne, alive and watching them leave with eyes that promised retribution. Henry followed her gaze and cursed softly, rowing with renewed urgency. When they finally reached dry land, wet sand beneath their trembling feet, Rosalind stopped to look at her husband. He stood before her, imposing, mysterious, terrifyingly attractive. They looked at each other with intensity, and a natural, furious magnetism drove them toward one another. Henry approached, their faces mere millimeters apart. He raised his palm and touched her face, feeling the softness of her feminine skin. He closed his eyes, taking in her scent, and a husky, suffering murmur escaped his throat. "Rosalind, you do not know how much I missed you." For a moment, she almost faltered. She had secretly wished for that reunion so many times. To feel his arms wrap around her, the touch of his hands caress her hair, the warmth of another breathtaking kiss. But then, the memory of the abandonment, of 7 years of an empty bed, and not a single miserable word, not even an explanation. A liquid fury surged within her, and Rosalind found her voice, and with it, all the pent-up rage of 7 solitary years. "Let go of me." He obeyed immediately, a subtle flash of pain cutting across his expression, always obedient. She bitterly realized, taking a step back with his hands raised, but his eyes looked at her like a starving man before an unattainable feast. "Rosalind, no." She cut him off, her voice rising. "You have no right, not after disappearing for 7 years. 7, without a word, without a letter, without a single damn line. I thought you were dead. Dead men do not send monthly fortunes to cover the whims of extravagant wives." The answer came out drier and more provocative than he probably intended. Rosalind lunged at him, her finger poking his chest as if she could pierce the armor of muscle and bone and reach the heart she was not sure he still possessed. "Whims? Whims? You think money replaces a husband? Replaces explanations? Replaces—" her voice broke treacherously. "Replaces knowing someone cares if you are alive or dead." Something in him cracked. She saw it happen, saw the mask of control crumble at the edges. "You think I did? Not care? I kept you safe, comfortable, and with wealth at your disposal. You never lacked anything. You think there was anything that was missing for you in these 7 years that did not destroy me not to be able to give? Oh, how lovely. The perfect husband. Look how he spoils me. Well, let me tell you something, noble Marquess. I missed having a husband at home." The words exploded from her like a projectile. "I missed someone who would not leave me alone on the night he promised to be mine. I missed you." The silence that followed was deafening. Henry stared at her with an expression so devastated that for a moment, just one, she almost regretted the words. Then he took a step forward, and another, until he was so close that she could feel the radiating heat of his body, see the tiny grey flecks in his blue eyes, count the accelerated beats of the pulse in his neck. "You are even more beautiful when you are angry." His voice came out, husky, charged. "Always were. And God help me, but even now, even with you justly hating me, all I can think about is how I was deprived of 7 years I could have spent watching exactly that passion in your eyes." Rosalind opened her mouth, to curse, to scream for something, but the sound of more explosions on the ship and distant shouts echoed from a small boat coming towards the beach, cutting off any response. Henry cursed, turning to assess the threat. "Thorne, he brought reinforcements." "Then fight. Is not that what you do? Show up dramatically and fight." Sarcasm dripping from every word. "I will not risk you again. Come, they are waiting for us up there." Before she could protest, he lifted her into his arms, literally picked her up as if she weighed no more than a feather, and began running across the rocky beach toward the narrow path climbing the cliffs. "Put me down. Henry, damn you, put me down." She beat her feminine, ineffective fists against his broad back, but she might as well have been striking granite for all the effect it had. He did not even flinch, climbing the steep trail with impossible agility, considering his size and the added weight he carried. And even through the anger, even through the resentment that choked her, Rosalind's traitorous body registered everything. His heat burning through the damp clothes, the strength of the arms that held her with possessive care, his scent, salt and sweat and something indefinably Henry that made her want to bury her face in his neck and inhale deeply. No, 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 no. She would not allow 7 years of abandonment to be erased by muscles and regretful blue eyes. But when she looked up and met his profile, jaw tight with concentration, eyes fixed on the path ahead, but mouth slightly open in an accelerated breath that had less to do with effort and more with the woman in his arms, something in her trembled dangerously. Henry looked down at at that exact moment, as if he felt the weight of her gaze, and for a suspended heartbeat their eyes met. Old thirst for affection, longing, desire so intense it was almost tangible. Beautiful, he thought, still so stubbornly, magnificently beautiful. Haughty even in vulnerability, insolent even in danger. Absolutely delicious in her righteous fury. How he had missed her. What a devastating, consuming yearning he had felt every second of every day for 7 endless years. And now she was here in his arms, vibrating with anger and life, and he would never, never let her go again, even if she hated him. Even if it took the rest of his life proving he deserved a second chance, he probably did not. "Where are you taking me?" Rosalind finally asked, her voice less harsh than she intended. "To the only place where I can protect you, until Thorne is neutralized," Henry responded, adjusting her in his arms, closer, safer. "And then, Rosalind," he paused, his eyes fixed, on the horizon where a solitary estate materialized atop the cliffs. "Then you will have every answer I can give, and I will have the chance to beg for a forgiveness I do not deserve." She did not reply, but she also did not tell him to put her down again. And for now, as the sight of pursuers showed up behind them, and the salty wind whipped their faces, it was the most truce either of them would wring from that impossible reunion 7 years too late. At the top of the cliff, 3 men awaited by an uncrested black carriage, discreet clothing, poorly disguised military posture, eyes sweeping the horizon with trained vigilance. When Henry emerged from the steep path with Rosalind still in his arms, they moved like well-oiled gears, one opening the carriage door, another retrieving provisions that were not there by chance, the third mounting the coachman's box with a rifle already in hand. My lord, the oldest of the 3, grey hair, a scar running across his face, briefly inclined his head. "Valecrest is prepared as instructed." Henry nodded, setting Rosalind down on the upholstered carriage seat with a care that contrasted with the urgency of his movements. She finally found enough balance to pull away from him, pressing herself against the opposite corner of the small space. He entered after her, knocking twice on the roof. The carriage started immediately, horses galloping along the coastal road at a speed that made the wheels shake violently. It was then that Rosalind looked through the back window, just to confirm the obvious. Down below, on the beach they had just abandoned, a small boat was touching the sand. And even at a distance, even through the morning mist, She recognized the figure jumping onto dry land. Blonde hair, arrogant demeanor. Alistair Thorne, alive and clearly furious, pointing towards the cliffs where they had climbed moments earlier. "He is coming." Her voice came out thinner than she liked. "I know." Henry did not look back. His eyes remained fixed on her, as if he feared she might disappear if he blinked. "But it will take time for him to secure horses and track our route. Enough time." Enough time for what? "To get you to safety." Something in the way he said it, like a promise and a penance simultaneously, made her shiver. The rest of the journey passed in tense silence. Rosalind refused to look at him, keeping her eyes fixed on the passing landscape. Dramatic cliffs giving way to green fields speckled with sheep, then back to the coast where the grey sea stretched to the infinite horizon. Eventually, after what felt like hours, but was probably a mere 40 minutes, the carriage turned through a rusty iron gate and followed a long, winding path. Valecrest Hall emerged through the mist like something out of a Gothic nightmare. A 3-story grey stone manor, narrow windows like suspicious eyes, corner towers that looked more like military fortifications than architectural ornaments. Isolated, solitary, perfect for keeping someone hidden or imprisoned. The carriage stopped before the main entrance. Henry got out first, reaching out a hand to help her. Rosalind ignored the gesture, descending alone and almost falling when her legs, still shaking from adrenaline and shock, refused to cooperate. He held her by the elbow, firm, but not restrictive, and this time she did not have enough pride to refuse. The support. "Welcome to Valecrest Hall, Marchioness." His voice sounded strangely formal, as if he were presenting a property to a guest, and not essentially kidnapping his own wife. "Have you brought me to another prison?" The words came out sharply. Something crossed his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or guilt, but his jaw merely tightened. "I have brought you to the safest place I know. There is a difference. Not for someone being held against their will." He did not reply. He merely guided her through heavy oak doors that opened to reveal an interior surprisingly well-maintained, considering the abandoned external appearance. Furniture covered with white sheets, dusty crystal chandeliers, a massive fireplace dominating the main hall, everything speaking of forgotten grandeur. A woman awaited them in the hall, in her 50s, hair pulled back in a severe bun, an impeccable black dress, a posture that screamed retired military governess. "My lord, Lady Rosalind." She made a brief curtsy. "Mrs. Beatrice Holloway at your service. I have prepared the apartments as requested." "Thank you, Beatrice." Henry turned to Rosalind. "Mrs. Holloway will attend to your needs. Hot bath, clean clothes, food." "And bars on the windows?" Rosalind interjected, sarcasm dripping. Mrs. Holloway arched an eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed to seeing the Marquess interrupted, but maintained professional silence. Henry, however, took a step closer, his voice dropping to a tone that was simultaneously soft and inflexible as steel. "There are no bars, but there are men positioned around the entire perimeter. Not because of you, Rosalind, because of him. Thorne will not rest until he has his revenge, and that means you cannot leave here until he is neutralized." "Then I am a prisoner." "You are protected," he corrected, patience clearly wearing thin. "And frankly, after what almost happened on that ship, I would sleep better knowing you. We're locked in an underground vault, but since I still have some respect for your autonomy," he paused, his jaw working as if he were chewing bitter words, "let me earn your trust. I will give you the North Tower room, comfortable, private, with a view of the sea." How generous, but even her sarcasm sounded weak now, exhaustion finally penetrating through the armor of anger. Henry must have noticed, because his expression softened marginally. Rest, recover, and then he hesitated, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her look away. "Then we will talk, I promise." Before she could respond, he was already turning away, nodding to Mrs. Holloway. "Take care of her. Anything she needs." "Yes, my lord." And then he left, long, determined strides echoing down the stone corridor, leaving Rosalind alone with the impenetrable-faced governess and enough questions to fill oceans. Mrs. Holloway led her through narrow staircases and corridors. That seemed endless, going up, always up, until they finally stopped before a carved oak door. "Your quarters, milady." She opened the door, revealing a space that was simultaneously a prison and a sanctuary. A circular room, obviously inside one of the towers. with tall windows offering panoramic views of the grey, violent sea, a canopy bed with navy velvet curtains, an antique desk, an armchair by the already lit fireplace, a side door that presumably led to a private bathroom. Everything immaculately clean and prepared. "The bath is ready," Mrs. Holloway indicated the door. "Clean clothes are in the wardrobe. Dinner will be served in an hour. Anything else?" Yes, Rosalind thought. Explanations, truths, sanity. But she only said, "No, thank you." The governess nodded and left, closing the door behind her. The sound of a key turning in the lock echoed like a sentence. Rosalind crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled the doorknob. Locked. Of course, locked. She punched the wood once, then again, before finally giving in to reality and letting herself fall onto the bed. 7 years waiting for answers. And now, when she finally had Henry on the same property, in the same tower practically, he had locked her away like a princess in a distorted fairy tale. The irony was so absurd she almost laughed. Almost. The following days established a bizarre routine. Mrs. Holloway brought meals 3 times a day, always delicious, always. Punctually, always followed by a discreet exit. Rosalind tried to talk to the woman to extract information, but she might as well have been talking to a stone statue for all the effect it had. Henry appeared twice a day, morning and evening, always outside the locked door. "Good morning, Rosalind. Did you sleep well?" Painful formality, as if they were polite strangers. Marvelously. Nothing like being locked in a tower to ensure restorative sleep. Sarcasm was her only weapon. "Ay. Sigh from the other side. You know why you are here. I know I am locked up, that apparently there is a dangerous man hunting me, that my ghost husband reappeared after 7 years as a maritime spy, that absolutely nothing in my life makes sense." Her voice rose uncontrollably at the end. Long silence, then, "A servant of the crown. I cannot say more. Cannot or will not. Both. Brutal honesty. There are things, secrets that are not mine to share. But, Rosalind," his voice, cracking at the edges, "you have to believe that it was never about not wanting you. Then what was it about? Enlighten me, husband." The word came out like an insult, but he did not respond. He only mumbled something that sounded like an apology and walked away, his heavy footsteps disappearing down the stairs. And Rosalind stayed there, her forehead pressed against the oak door, torn between wanting to scream and wanting to cry. On the 4th day of confinement, boredom and frustration led her to explore the room more thoroughly. Books on the shelf, mostly about navigation and military strategy, curiously, a desk with empty drawers, a wardrobe with women's clothing that seemed exactly her size, as if someone had specifically ordered it for her. Disturbing and thoughtful simultaneously, it was when she was looking for extra candles that she found it. Behind a loose wooden panel near the fireplace, a small compartment built into the stone wall, locked obviously, but Rosalind was not a scandalous Marchioness of London without developing certain questionable talents. A hairpin, patience, delicate fingers. 5 minutes later, the lock yielded with a satisfying click. Inside, a stack of yellowed letters tied with string. A black wax seal, not red, not the Ravensholt family crest. Black. Documents with names she did not recognize. Edward Langmore, Thomas Williams, James Blackwell, all with facial drawings that, when studied, carefully were variations of the same man, Henry. False identities, maps marked with maritime routes and coastal locations, and at the bottom, almost forgotten, a gold locket with the inscription, "For God, King, and Country." The pieces began to fit together. Not completely. There were still huge gaps she could not fill, but enough to form a hazy picture. Henry had not disappeared out of whim or disinterest. He really was serving the crown in a capacity that required absolute anonymity and constant danger, and somehow this involved Thorne. She was still processing when she heard it. Footsteps, not the heavy, measured ones of Mrs. Holloway or Henry, multiple, urgent, and then voices, low, tense, on the other side of the door. "They have surrounded the south perimeter. At least 15 men. "Thorne?" Henry's voice, raspy. "Confirmed, my lord. He brought mercenaries, well armed. A low, explosive curse. How long until they reach the hall? 20 minutes, maybe less." Tense silence, then, "Prepare defenses. Position sharpshooters in the east and west towers, and bring—" His voice faded as he walked away. Rosalind froze, her heart beating wildly. Thorne was here, coming for revenge and for her, and Henry was going to fight and probably die for someone he had left behind like inconvenient luggage 7 years ago. No, no. She no longer knew if she hated him or something else, but she would not allow him to die for her, without at least understanding why, without hearing the full truth, without— Footsteps again, returning, stopping on the other side of the door, the sound of metal scraping against wood, a key turning. The door opened slowly, revealing Henry leaning against the frame, hair messy, shirt still stained with soot, blue eyes incandescent with emotion he no longer tried to hide. Rosalind. His voice was different, less controlled, more raw, completely stripped of the layers of formality he had used in recent days. She instinctively backed away from the door, her heart pounding, but she couldn't look away. He entered, closing the door behind him but not locking it. Every movement of his was measured, as if he were approaching a wild animal about to bolt. "Thorne is here," he began, his jaw clenched. "He surrounded the south perimeter with mercenaries. I have to go. I have to fight." A pause, his breath trembling at the edges. "But before I go down to what may be my last battle, you need to know." He took a step closer, then another, until he was so near she could see the silver flecks in his eyes, under voluminous reddish eyelashes. "Every night away from you was torture. Every dawn, knowing you woke up alone, thinking I did not care, was worse than any wound I took in 7 years of missions." Rosalind bit her lip until she tasted metallic, fighting back tears that threatened to overflow. "Henry, you deserved better. You deserved everything," his voice cracking. "And I gave you nothing but silence and absence, but Rosalind—" He raised his hand, his fingers hesitating inches from her face before finally touching it, tracing the line of her jaw with devastating reverence. "But there was not a single day, a single hour when I did not think of you, about what it would be like to return, about what it would be like to finally be able to—" He did not finish. He did not need to. The thirst for affection in his eyes completed the sentence in ways words never could. "I have to go." He abruptly stepped back as if touching her burned. "I have a duty, honor, men counting on me." He turned toward the door, his shoulders tense as a rope about to snap. "Henry, wait!" Rosalind crossed the space between them on an impulse, her fingers catching his arm. He froze under her touch, his muscles contracting. "Do not leave me locked in here, please." He turned slowly, his expression anguished. "I cannot risk you. If something happens, if they breach our defensive, I am not as defenseless as you think." She raised her chin defiantly. "Put a pistol in my hand, and you will see that I spent my time well learning new skills with trained gentlemen." Something shifted in his expression, surprise first, then admiration, and then jealousy, pure, primitive, possessive jealousy that darkened his eyes like a forming storm. "Trained gentlemen, who taught you to shoot?" "Rosalind?" The question came out low, dangerous. She smiled, slow, malicious, deliberately provocative. "That does not matter now, husband. Just go." In 2 steps he cornered her against the stone wall, his hands braced on either side, his presence so intense that the air seemed to thin between them. There was authority in every movement, the command of someone who carried the weight of power, yet contained his own strength. "Who taught you to shoot, Rosalind?" It was not a question. It was a tense order, marked by jealousy and disbelief. "Tell me, now." Her heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Still, she held his gaze firmly. "I do not owe you explanations for what I did during your absence." "Yes, you do." He leaned closer, his warm breath mingling with hers. "I am your husband." Rosalind laughed, a light, mocking sound that hid the trembling in her veins. "Only on paper, I should remind you." Something in him broke. He pulled her into a brief, unexpected kiss, charged with anger, longing, and silent confession. A kiss that said everything words could not. She lost her breath, her eyes watering from the intensity of the moment. "For the last time," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "which man taught you to shoot?" She needed a few seconds to catch her breath. "My cousin, Major Jacob Whitfield," she answered, still stunned but firm. Henry sighed, long, deep, laden with relief that was almost comical. "Jacob," He knew Jacob Whitfield, an honourable man, an exemplary soldier, and most importantly, Rosalind's cousin. No threat, no rival, just a cousin probably too weak to deny the capricious and extravagant requests of his untamable cousin. A smile began to form on his lips, slow, dangerous, completely masculine upon recognizing her provocative plays, strategically released half information to arouse jealousy. God, she was magnificent, bold, manipulative, absolutely his. And heavens, he could not wait to finally put limits on that provocative little mouth. "How well do you shoot, my impetuous Rosalind?" he asked, his voice still husky, but now tinged with something bordering on amusement. Rosalind tilted her head, a challenging smile blossoming on her swollen lips. "Give me a chance and I will make you hold your breath, darling." Henry laughed, low, disbelieving, absolutely enchanted. "My God, I have created a monster. You created nothing." She corrected, pushing him lightly to gain space. "I became this alone, while you played sailor around the world." "Fair enough." He stepped back, but held her hand, fingers intertwined with a possessive firmness that allowed no rejection. "Then let us go, Lady Ravensholt. Let us see if my wife shoots as well as she provokes." And together, truly together for the first time in 7 years, they left the tower room toward the battle that awaited below, with external dangers and internal tensions equally lethal, equally inevitable, equally impossible to ignore. The stone staircase echoed with their hurried steps, his heavy and determined, hers surprisingly silent for someone wearing voluminous skirts. Henry did not release her hand for a second, intertwining his fingers with possessive firmness as he guided her through the labyrinthine corridors of Valecrest Hall. The sound of breaking glass and distant shouts grew louder with each second, and Rosalind felt adrenaline replace fear in her blood. "Defense room, there!" Henry pointed to a reinforced oak door at the end of the corridor. He opened it with a key he pulled from his pocket, revealing an impressive collection of antique weapons, carefully stored defensive pieces and blades. He grabbed 2 antique pistols, checking they were primed, and then extended one to her. "Show me what you have learned, Lady Ravensholt." Rosalind took the weapon, feeling the familiar weight, the perfect balance. She checked the cylinder, locked the trigger, and assumed the stance Jacob had spent months correcting. Henry watched her with an indecipherable expression, part admiration, part something darker and possessive. "Impressive," he muttered, "but downstairs will not be a static target. They will be men trying to kill you." "Then I had better hit first," she replied with false lightness, but her hands were steady. They descended together to the main hall, just as the front door exploded inward. 5 mercenaries entered in military formation, dark clothes, weapons drawn, faces partially covered by scarves. The leader pointed directly at Henry and growled in an accent that was a grotesque mixture of French and Russian. "The Marquess, finally, our employer will be pleased. Your employer is a coward who sends others to do his dirty work." Henry spat back, instinctively positioning himself in front of Rosalind. "Where is Thorne? Busy with more important matters." The mercenary laughed in a harsh, cruel sound. "But he sent messages. First he will take you, then—" His eyes moved to Rosalind, sweeping over her body in such an invasive way that she felt bile rise in her throat. "He is going to take your wife for himself." The fury that exploded in Henry was tangible. He reacted without hesitation. The shot hit the target, making him stagger backward. Instant chaos. The other 4 charged, and suddenly everything was movement. Sound, violence. Rosalind did not think. She just reacted. When a mercenary came from the left, she aimed and fired, immobilizing the man before he got close. Henry turned, surprise and pride flashing in his eyes for a fraction of a second before he returned to the fight. They moved like a deadly dance, he advancing, she covering, anticipating each other's movements with a synchronicity that should not exist between strangers. But they were not strangers, were they? They were husband and wife, bound by broken vows and 7 years of silence, but bound nonetheless. "Rosalind, down!" Henry roared, and she instinctively obeyed, feeling a bullet whistle past where her head had been seconds before. She rolled, got up, shot again, this time hitting the attacker's hand, making him drop the weapon with an explosive curse. "That is my girl," Henry muttered with fierce approval, but then she did something completely reckless. She saw another mercenary trying to flanked them through the side corridor and ran, literally ran toward the danger to cut off his route. "Rosalind, no!" Henry's voice echoed desperately, and she heard him running after her, but she was already there, already aiming, already. The mercenary grabbed her before she could shoot, a thick arm wrapping around her waist, cold metal menacingly touching her skin. "Drop the gun, sweetness, or I will—" He never finished. Henry collided with him like an avalanche. Pure brute, force and uncontrolled fury, ripping him from her and smashing him against the wall with an impact that vibrated the stones. 3 quick movements, and the man fell, defeated. Henry turned to Rosalind, chest heaving, eyes wild. "What in hell were you thinking? He could have—" "But he did not," she interrupted, her chin raised defiantly even as her hands trembled. "I was covering the flank. You were risking yourself unnecessarily," he growled, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. "When I tell you to stay back, you stay back, understand? I am not your subordinate, Henry, I am my wife," he finished, his voice low and dangerous. "Exactly, mine. And I will not stand by and watch you throw yourself into danger as if your life had no value. My life had so much value over the last 7 years that you did not even bother to send a letter." She exploded, all the adrenaline of the fight turning into emotional fury. They stood there, panting, staring at each other with a strange mixture of anger, residual fear, and something much more dangerous brewing between them. The sound of groans from the wounded mercenaries around them was a surreal soundtrack. "Hall is clear, my lord." One of Henry's men cut the tension. He was at the entrance, rifle in hand, military posture fully apparent now. 6 contained, 2 retreating. Men are pursuing. Henry nodded, but his eyes never left Rosalind. Thorne. He was not among them. Another man, one of those waiting atop the cliff, appeared wiping a superficial cut from his forehead. Just mercenaries, but one of them spoke before passing out. Said Thorne is preparing the final trap. Did not elaborate. "Coward," Henry muttered, his jaw tight. Then finally he turned to Rosalind, his eyes sweeping over her face with barely contained urgency. "Are you hurt?" "No," but her voice trembled treacherously. He took a step towards her, his hands rising as if to touch her to check for himself, but then he seemed to remember where they were, surrounded by Mrs. Holloway and the men who had fought alongside them. His hands fell, clenching into fists at his sides. "You were incredible," he said, his voice low and raspy, "and absolutely reckless and magnificent." His eyes burned with an intensity that made her shiver, and I almost— He did not finish, but he did not need to. The way he looked at her, as if she were the only thing that mattered amidst the chaos and destruction, said everything. "The hall is secure, my lord," Mrs. Holloway interrupted with professional discretion, but Rosalind noticed the glint of approval in the governess's eyes as she observed the tension between them. "Should I prepare the quarters for treating injuries?" "It will not be necessary," Henry replied without taking his eyes off Rosalind. "But thank you, Beatrice. You and the men have done an exemplary job." The governess inclined her head. "Just doing our duty, my lord." She signaled the others, and the team discreetly began to disperse, dragging unconscious mercenaries, clearing debris, giving the couple the privacy they clearly needed. When they were finally alone in the devastated hall, the silence between them was deafening. Henry took another step toward her, then another, until he was so close that Rosalind could see the soot smudges on his face, the superficial cut above his eyebrow, the way his chest rose, and fell with breathing controlled only at the edges. "Rosalind," his voice was strangled, "when I saw that man threatening you, when I thought I might lose you before I—" He closed his eyes, visibly fighting an internal battle. When he opened them again, there was determination there. "Come with me, please, I need to talk to you." Alone. She should refuse. She should maintain a safe distance. But something in the raw vulnerability in his eyes made her nod. "All right." He took her hand, a simple gesture that sent warmth up her arm, and guided her upstairs through silent corridors until they reached what were clearly his private quarters. He opened the door, allowing her to enter first, and then closed it behind him with a soft click that seemed too final. The room was Spartan, bed, desk, wardrobe, but it was the desk that captured her attention, covered by a carefully organized pile of papers. "What is—" she began, but he was already beside her, picking up the papers with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. "Newspaper clippings," he admitted, his voice low. "About you, every scandal, every party, He hesitated. Every rumor. Rosalind picked up the first paper. Her own face stared back at her, an illustration from when she had appeared at Lady Pemberton's ball, wearing that scandalous red dress. The headline screamed, "Marchioness of Ravensholt shocks society again. Where is her husband?" She flipped. Through more. Dozens of them. Perhaps hundreds. All about her. All meticulously cut out, dated, saved. "You saved all of these?" I read every word. Henry was behind her, his voice heavy. "Every article about the scandalous Marchioness of Ravensholt, every rumor about your supposed affairs, He paused. "Every mention of men in your circle." She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. There was pain there, and jealousy, and an unasked question. "And do you believe them? The rumors?" "I prefer to hear the truth from you. Tell me the truth." It was not an accusation. It was a desperate plea hidden by the veneer of impartiality on his face. "Please, Rosalind." She tilted her head, studying him. She could deny it easily. She could reassure him, but something malicious, and wounded in her, wanted to make him suffer a little. "What if they were true? You left me, Henry, for 7 years, without a word, without an explanation. What right would you have to judge how I filled that void?" He paled, his jaw working. "None," he admitted with a strangled voice. "I would have no right at all, but still, it would destroy me. I am your husband. We took vows." A heavy silence. Then Rosalind sighed, allowing the mask to drop. There was no one. The words came, out soft, honest. There never was. Not because there were no offers, let that be clear, but because she looked away, her vulnerability too exposed. "Because my stupid heart still belonged to the ghost who left me." The relief that flooded his features was devastating. He took a step forward, but she raised her hand, stopping him. "But that does not erase 7 years, Henry. It does not erase the pain." "I know." He began to unbutton his shirt, his movements slow and deliberate. "I know it does not erase it, but perhaps this will help you understand." The shirt fell away, revealing a torso that made her gasp. Sculpted muscles, yes, but it was the scars that stole her attention. Several of them, some thin and silvery, others thick and jagged. One particularly prominent one ran across his left ribs. Rosalind reached out without thinking, her fingers tracing the scar on his ribs. "What?" "A blade. Port of Marseille. I almost died." His voice was low, his eyes fixed on her face. "This one here." He guided her hand to a scar on his shoulder. A bullet. Almost pierced the artery. Then to another on his abdomen. "Bayonet. We lost an informant that day." He captured her hand, pressing it against his chest over a heart that beat wildly. "Every single one of them, Rosalind. Every scar, every wound. Every time I almost did not come back, I thought of you, of coming back to you, of finally being able to—" He did not finish, but he did not need to. Rosalind looked at him, truly looked, and saw neither the polite Marquess who had left her, nor the rustic sailor who had rescued her. She saw a man who had survived unimaginable things, a man who carried the weight of secrets she did not yet fully know, a man who apparently had thought of her through everything. Something in her softened, not complete forgiveness, not yet. But he moved closer, slowly, giving her a chance to retreat, and when she did not, his hands rose to cup her face with silent reverence. "Rosalind," and then he kissed her. It was not the quick, restrained kiss from the tower room. It was something completely different, intense, uncontained, laden with 7 years of longing. Condensed into a single instant, his lips met hers with contained yearning, and she leaned into him, her heart beating wildly. Rosalind was lost in that moment, her fingers tangled in his hair, drawing them closer until the world disappeared. He let out a low sound, somewhere between relief and emotion, and something inside her yielded, not out of desire, but out of reunion. She felt his strength in contrast to her own fragility, the trembling of both, their hearts beating out of sync with time. But then, just when she thought he would let the feeling take over, he stopped. He froze and pulled away with visible effort, his breathing ragged, his gaze begging for forgiveness without saying a word. "Not like this." His voice was wrecked. "Not with hurt still between us." He kept his hands on her face, his thumbs tracing her cheeks with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity of the kiss. When I make you truly my wife, Rosalind, and I will, I swear on everything I am, it will be with your forgiveness, with you wanting me as much as I want you, without anger, without resentment, just us." Rosalind gasped, frustrated and inexplicably moved. "You have a long way to go then, husband," she managed to say, her voice husky. "Forgiveness is not earned with just kisses." A slow, dangerous smile curved his lips. "Is it not? Then tell me, Lady Ravensholt, how is it earned?" "Truths," she answered simply. "All of them." He closed his eyes. Briefly, as if absorbing the weight of that. Then he nodded, opening them again with renewed determination. "All right, truths." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Before she could speak, urgent knocks on the door interrupted them. "My lord, urgent visitor," Henry cursed, quickly pulling his shirt back on. "Enter!" The door opened, revealing Cornelius Ashworth, covered in road dust, his face marked by fatigue and something that looked like genuine fear. "My lord, Lady Rosalind," he made a brief bow. "I came as soon as I received the news." "Cornelius?" Rosalind blinked, surprised. "What are you doing here?" The butler looked at Henry as if asking for permission. Henry nodded tensely. Cornelius turned to Rosalind, his military posture finally completely apparent. "Lady Rosalind, I have served the Ravensholt house for 17 years, but I have also served the crown for 23. I was assigned by the Marquess," he looked at Henry, "to protect you during his absence. Myself, Mrs. Holloway, and 3 other members of the staff, all agents, all under orders to keep you safe without your knowledge." Rosalind felt the floor tilt. "You, all of you, were watching me." "Protecting," Henry corrected gently. "Never alone, Rosalind, never unprotected, even when I could not be there." She did not know whether to feel touched or furious. Both, perhaps. But before she could process it, Cornelius continued, "My lord, there is news, bad news. Lord Thorne, he has kidnapped the Duke of Winthorpe." The world stopped. "Emery?" Rosalind's voice came out weak. "My brother?" "Yes, milady. He disappeared 3 days ago. No one knew until yesterday morning when a letter arrived at Ravensholt House." Cornelius extended an envelope. "It is addressed to both of you. I came as fast as I could." Henry opened it, read it quickly, and Rosalind saw all the colour drain from his face. "That bastard! What? What does it say?" She snatched the paper from his hands, reading with growing horror. "Marquess and Marchioness of Ravensholt, I have something you desire. Meet me on the high seas, at the included coordinates, within 4 days. Come alone. Do not involve the authorities, or the Duke will meet a terrible end slowly as he watches your precious estate burn. Do not test my patience. A.T." Rosalind's hands were shaking so much the paper almost slipped. "He has Emery. That monster has my brother." Henry pulled her to him, hugging her with protective strength, even as his own jaw tightened in impotent fury. "It is a trap, an obvious trap. I do not care." Rosalind pulled away, her eyes burning with fierce determination. "He is my brother. I am going." "We are going," Henry corrected. "Together, but not the way Thorne expects." He looked at Cornelius. "Send a message to Captain Norwick. Tell him I need the Albatross and his entire crew. We have 3 days to prepare a counterattack." His eyes met Rosalind's, burning with a lethal promise. "Thorne wants a trade, then we will give him exactly what he deserves. But it will not be us. It will be vengeance." The sea was rough when the sea. Albatross cut through the grey waters toward the coordinates Thorne had specified. 3 days had passed since Cornelius's arrival with the devastating news, and every hour had been consumed in meticulous preparation. Henry had spent sleepless nights strategizing with Captain Norwick, while Rosalind, to his surprise and growing admiration, insisted on helping, bringing unexpected knowledge about chemical compounds she had learned as an eccentric hobby during the lonely years. "Are you sure about this?" Henry had asked when she explained her plan, holding vials of substances she had mixed with unsettling precision. "I learned from London's best chemist," she had replied with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "When one has too much time and money, one develops peculiar interests." Now, standing on the deck beside Henry, as the enemy ship materialized through the morning mist, Rosalind felt the weight of the vials hidden in the folds of her skirt. The plan was risky, but it was Emery, her brother, and she would do anything. There is still time to turn back, Henry murmured beside her, his eyes fixed on the approaching ship. I can go alone. Negotiate. No. Her voice was firm. He asked for both of us. And besides, she looked at him, meeting those blue eyes that had haunted her for 7 years. We are in this together. For the first time in a long time, we are truly together. Something crossed his face, an emotion so intense that she almost recoiled. But then Thorne's ship was alongside theirs, and planks were thrown down to form a precarious bridge between the vessels. Henry took her hand, intertwining their fingers with a firmness that was part protection, part silent plea. Together, he repeated. But promise me, if anything goes wrong, I promise nothing, she replied with brutal honesty, except that Thorne will regret the day he decided to use my brother as bait to threaten my husband. A flicker of admiration shone in Henry's intense blue eyes. A moment later, they crossed the improvised bridge between the ships hand in hand, and Rosalind noticed how Thorne's crew watched them with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked like pity, as if they already considered them lost. The enemy ship's deck was dark, poorly maintained, with an unpleasant odor of neglect and dark purposes. Thorne awaited them in the center, impeccably dressed as always, his charming smile firmly in place. But his eyes betrayed the madness simmering beneath the polished surface, and beside him, tied to the main mast with thick ropes, was Emery. Her brother looked exhausted, his clothes dirty, his face marked by days without proper care, but alive. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Rosalind, no! It's a trap, you shouldn't have come." "Silence, Duke," Thorne cut in without even looking at him. His eyes were fixed on Rosalind, sweeping over her in a way that made her shiver with revulsion. "Lady Ravensholt, what a joy to finally have you here. And Marquess—" His gaze turned to Henry, hardening. "We finally meet again without masks or false names." "You have what you want," Henry said, his voice controlled but vibrating with tension. "We are here. Release the Duke. Soon." Thorne circled them slowly, a predator assessing his prey. "But first, we need to settle certain matters. You destroyed years of my work, Montrose. Years of careful planning, valuable contacts, profitable operations, all ruined by your irritating interference. You worked against the crown," Henry replied coldly. "Against your own country. That is not work, that is treason. Treason, loyalty, meaningless words," Thorne dismissed with a dismissive gesture. "But all this can be resolved. I have a proposal." He stopped before them, his eyes dancing between Henry and Rosalind. "I will settle my score with you, Marquess. A matter of honor, if you prefer." And then, his gaze fixed on Rosalind with disturbing intensity. "She stays with me. I promise I will love her with fervor, give her everything you denied her for 7 years." The fury that exploded in Henry was palpable. He took a step forward, placing himself between Thorne and Rosalind, his voice coming out low and deadly. "Touch her, and it will be the last thing you do in this life." Thorne laughed, an unpleasant sound that echoed across the deck. "Brave, but impotent. Look around, Montrose. My men outnumber yours. This is my territory, my rules." "Your rules?" Rosalind spoke for the first time, her clear voice cutting through the tension. "Interesting, because from what I have observed, Lord Thorne, your rules seem to favor cowards who hide behind hired men and kidnapped brothers." She took a step beside Henry, ignoring his low sound of protest. "If you are so powerful, why did you need traps and threats? Why? Didn't you face my husband directly?" Something dangerous flashed in Thorne's eyes. "Mind your sharp tongue, Lady Ravensholt. I can cut it." "Or perhaps," Rosalind continued, subtly moving to the side, forcing Thorne to turn to keep her in his field of vision. Henry immediately understood what she was doing, creating distance, dividing his attention. "Perhaps you are exactly what you seem. A man who feigns greatness, but hides desperate mediocrity." Thorne moved so fast, she barely had time to react. He grabbed her arm, pulling her against his chest, his hand rising to her neck in a veiled threat. "You need to learn respect." Henry roared, a primitive, furious sound, but before he could move, Rosalind acted. Her knee shot up hard, hitting Thorne in a strategic spot that made him double over with a strangled sound, and as he stumbled, she pulled one of the vials hidden in her skirt and threw it onto the deck at his feet. The reaction was instantaneous. Dense, acrid smoke exploded from the spilled liquid, filling the air with a haze that burned the eyes and lungs. Men coughed, stumbled, disoriented. Henry grabbed Rosalind, pulling her through the chaos, while the Albatross crew, prepared for exactly this signal, stormed the deck with military efficiency, their noses and eyes protected. What followed was controlled confusion. Henry guided Rosalind to where Emery was tied, cutting his ropes with a swift movement while she held the second vial ready to use it if necessary. Emery fell into their arms, exhausted but unharmed. "Brave little fool," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "You shouldn't have come." "Don't be ridiculous," she replied, helping him stand. "You are my brother. Where else would I be? Take this handkerchief, cover your nose and avoid the smoke." Through the dissipating smoke, Rosalind saw Henry and Thorne finally face to face. No more subterfuge, no more games. Just two men and an unresolved issue that needed conclusion. They moved like dancers, every move calculated, every blow defended. Henry was stronger, more trained, but Thorne fought with the desperation of a man who had nothing to lose. It was when Thorne pulled something from his coat, a small metallic object that glinted in the faint light, that Rosalind felt icy terror. She did not think. She just moved, running through the space separating them, shouting a warning that Henry had already perceived. He dodged, a fluid and precise movement, and then it was over. Thorne was on the ground, disarmed, defeated, with Henry standing over him. "It is finished," Henry said simply. "Your contacts have been exposed, your network destroyed, and you—" He stood up, letting Norwick's men take control. "Will face the Crown's justice." Thorne laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "Do you think you have won? This never ends, Montrose. There will always be another. Always." "Perhaps," Henry conceded. "But not today, and not with her." He walked over to Rosalind, who was still holding Emery, and for the first time since everything began, she saw the tension drain from his shoulders. "Are you all right? Both of you?" "We are," she confirmed, although her legs were shaking treacherously. The adrenaline was dissipating, leaving only exhaustion and relief. The following hours passed in a blur of activity. Thorne and his men were imprisoned. Emery was taken to the Albatross's cabin for proper care. Agreements were made, reports written, loose ends tied up, and finally, as night fell and the sea calmed, Rosalind found herself alone on the deck under a canopy of impossible stars. Footsteps behind her announced Henry's arrival. He stopped beside her, their shoulders almost touching, both looking at the infinite horizon where sky met water in an indistinct line. "You were incredible once again," he said softly. "That chemical compound. It was brilliant." "I had good teachers," she replied, "and plenty of time to learn interesting things." A comfortable silence settled between them. Then, gathering a courage she did not know she possessed, Rosalind turned to face him. "Henry, why did you really leave that night? The complete truth, no more secrets." He closed his eyes, his breath trembling. When he opened them again, there was pain there, and truth, and love so deep it stole her breath. And then, to her complete surprise, he knelt, right there. On the cold deck, the Marquess of Ravensholt, secret agent of the Crown, warrior who had just defeated a mortal enemy, knelt before his wife. "Because the Prince Regent ordered me to." The words came out broken. "On our wedding night, a messenger arrived with the royal seal, a conspiracy discovered, a network of spies threatening the royal family. I was the only one with the necessary skills, the right contacts, and the mission was so urgent it could not wait until dawn." His hands captured hers, squeezing with desperation. "If I refused, I would be considered a traitor. And you, Rosalind, as my wife, would be considered a traitor by association. They would have investigated you, interrogated you, possibly imprisoned you until they proved your innocence." Tears, real tears, glistened in his eyes. I could not let that happen to you. I am a man, so I chose to protect you in the only way I knew how, by leaving, by keeping you ignorant, by making you safe through my abandonment." Rosalind felt her own tears streaming freely now. "You suffered alone. For me, what was supposed to be weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Every time I thought I was close to finishing, I discovered a new layer of the conspiracy, a new danger, and every day away from you was torture, but every day protecting you was worth the pain." He pressed his forehead against her hands, his voice completely breaking. "Forgive me, please. Rosalind, forgive me for choosing your well-being over your happiness, for loving you in the most selfish way possible, keeping you safe, but alone." Rosalind reached out, helping him stand, and when he stood before her, she did not release his hands. She held them firmly, as if she could anchor all the pain and loneliness he had carried for 7 endless years. Their eyes met, blue against blue, and in that moment, under the starry, infinite sky, there was no more room for doubt. "You are the most intriguing, noble, frustrating, passionate, and overwhelmingly attractive man I have ever met," she whispered, her voice trembling with raw emotion. "And I," a deep breath, gathering the courage for words she had not said for so long that she had forgotten how liberating they were. "I love you, Henry. I always have. Even when I thought I hated you, even when I built walls around my heart, you were always there. Always." His eyes widened, pure vulnerability, crossing his features. "Rosalind, and I forgive you," she continued, tears streaming freely now but smiling through them. "I understand now. I finally understand the sacrifice you made, the loneliness you endured, all for me, all to protect me." He stood motionless, as if he feared the wrong move might break the spell, make those words vanish like a mirage. "Do you truly forgive me?" The question came out husky, laden with fearful hope. "With all my heart," she replied without hesitation. Something in him broke, not from pain, but from a relief so profound it was almost physical. He pulled her into his arms with an urgency that stole her breath, one hand sliding to the back of her head, his fingers intertwining in her hair, the other wrapping around her waist and pressing her against his body as if he wanted to merge with her. His eyes burned with an intensity that made her shiver, not from fear, but from anticipation. 7 years. His voice came out, low, husky, charged with promise and barely contained desire. 7 years dreaming of this moment, 7 years wanting you to the point of madness. He leaned closer, his lips brushing hers with a softness that contrasted violently with the tension in his muscles. "It is time to fulfill my vows and honor my beloved wife." And then he kissed her. It was not the desperate, urgent kiss from before. It was something deeper, more devastating. It was promise and possession and passion, intertwined. It was 7 years of hunger finally satisfied. It was love declared without words, only through the pressure of lips against lips, the warmth of bodies finally allowed to touch without reserve, the shared tremor that ran through them when she surrendered completely to the kiss, to his arms, to him. Under the starry sky on the deck of the Albatross, surrounded by the infinite sea and the promise of a future finally within reach, Henry Montrose and Rosalind finally found what they had been seeking for so long, each other. When the kiss finally broke, not for lack of desire but for need of air, Henry kept Rosalind close, forehead to forehead, their breaths mingling in the narrow space between them. "Come with me." It was not a request. It was a whispered invitation against her lips that made time stop. He guided her across the silent deck, the crew discreetly absent. He descended to the moonlit cabin, where the lamp cast a golden, calm light. Henry set her down with an almost reverent care, his hands resting on her waist. "Rosalind," his voice was lower now, filled with vulnerability. "Let me hold you in my arms, as I have dreamed for 7 endless years. Let me love you with the tenderness that time denied me." She looked at him with silent love. "I was always yours, you fool." He held her face in his hands and kissed her, soft, devoted, as if he were learning to breathe again. "Rosalind," he whispered, "you are more beautiful than any dream I kept, and you are exactly as I remembered, only better." Henry intertwined his hands with hers. "I promise that every dawn will be mine to love you, that there will never again be distance between us." "You have already proven it," she said, "by returning, by fighting, by staying." "Always," he promised. Then he kissed her again, long, serene, full of everything words could not contain. The lamplight enveloped the couple like an embrace. The sound of the waves marked the rhythm of 2 hearts finally at peace. "I love you," he whispered. "And I love you," she replied. Henry leaned in, gently kissing each of her eyelids. Gestures of pure adoration before capturing her lips in a kiss that carried all the promises they would make together from now on. "Mine," he whispered against her mouth, his voice choked with emotion. "You are completely mine, Rosalind, and you are mine," she replied, a smile illuminating her face as she lost herself in the blue eyes she loved so much, and as the lamplight danced softly on the cabin walls, while the waves rocked the ship in an eternal rhythm, Henry and Rosalind finally became one heart, united not just by vows, but by a love that withstood the impossible. The silvery moon illuminated them, and the stars silently witnessed the merging of two souls that had finally found each other. 6 months later, a beautiful morning arrived softly through the velvet curtains of the main apartments at Ravensholt House in Mayfair. Rosalind woke slowly, enveloped in familiar warmth and a heavy arm resting on her expanded waist. She smiled, her hand instinctively going to her rounded belly where new life was growing, the fruit of that night on the Albatross and all the nights since. "Good morning, Lady Ravensholt." Henry's husky voice murmured against her neck, his lips pressing a soft kiss there. "Good morning, Lord Ravensholt," she replied, turning in his arms, or trying to, considering her dimensions had increased considerably. He helped her with a low laugh, settling her against his chest. "How is our son this morning?" he asked, his large, calloused hand sliding over her belly with a tenderness that still surprised her after 6 months of true marriage. "Active," she replied with a giggle. "I think he inherited your restless nature, or your charming stubbornness," he countered, his eyes shining with humor. Then his expression shifted to something between amusement and feigned apprehension. "Speaking of stubbornness, next week's ball. Dare I ask what you are planning this time?" Rosalind assumed an air of studied innocence. The one he had already learned meant delightful trouble. "Oh, nothing much. Just, let's say the garden will be scandalously exotic. I hired artists directly from India. Dancers, musicians, a snake charmer." Henry closed his eyes and let out a long, dramatic sigh. "I am lost. Completely lost. London society will never recover." "Exactly the intention, my dear," she replied with a satisfied smile, kissing his chin. "We are the Montroses, the Marquesses of Ravensholt. Boredom is not an option." He laughed, a rich, genuine sound she loved to provoke, and pulled her closer, being extremely careful with her condition. "At least promise there will be no elephants this time?" "I can promise nothing," she murmured mysteriously, and he groaned exaggeratedly, making her laugh. Only a week later, and the gardens of Ravensholt House had been transformed into something out of a fantastic tale. Lanterns of vibrant colors hung from the trees, casting golden and crimson light upon dazzled guests. Silk fabrics fluttered in the wind, creating exotic tents where servants offered Indian delicacies and aromatic drinks. In the center, an elevated platform where Bharatanatyam dancers performed hypnotic movements to the sound of sitars and tablas. London society was simultaneously shocked and delighted, as always happened at the Marchioness of Ravensholt's events. But this time, there was a crucial difference. Henry was by her side, not hidden, not absent. There, solid and present, his hand resting possessively on the small of Rosalind's back, as she received compliments and admiring exclamations from guests. He wore a medal recently received from the Prince Regent, an honor for exceptional services to the crown, which had definitively silenced any malicious murmurs about his disappearance. The Marquess of Ravensholt had not been an absent and negligent husband. He had been a secret hero, and London now knew it. Emery Davenhall, the Duke of Winthorpe, approached with 2 glasses of champagne, extending one to Henry. His eyes shone with renewed vitality. "Montrose," he greeted with a nod. "I must admit, when my sister told me she had hired a snake charmer, I thought she was exaggerating." Henry accepted, the glass with a low laugh. "I have learned never to underestimate Rosalind. It is a guaranteed path to constant surprises." Emery watched his sister, radiant in a golden silk dress that perfectly accommodated her rounded belly, chatting animatedly with a group of matrons clearly fascinated by her stories, and shook his head in admiration. "She is unsurpassed, always has been, but now," he paused, looking at Henry with something akin to gratitude. "Now, she is complete. Thanks to you." Henry followed his gaze, watching his wife laugh at something Lady Blackthorne had said, a hand resting unconsciously on the belly where their child grew. Something in his chest tightened, a love so deep it still surprised him in moments like this. No, he corrected gently. Rosalind was always complete. She just allows me to be part of her completeness now. She is incredibly intelligent, brave, and fascinating. Look at how fundamental she was in capturing Thorne, and for me to conclude my mission with honors. He took a sip of champagne, a smile touching his lips. I can honestly say, Winthorpe, that I could not have chosen a more perfect Marchioness. My life is always a new surprise by her side. Surprise, Emery repeated with a dry laugh. That is a diplomatic way of describing my sister's organized chaos. Fascinating chaos, Henry amended, his eyes never leaving Rosalind, and I would not trade it for anything. At that moment, Rosalind looked across the crowded garden and met his eyes. Even at a distance, even surrounded by dozens of people, the connection between them was immediate and electric. She smiled, that luminous smile reserved only for him, and discreetly touched her belly, then pointed at him with a look that clearly said, "This is your fault, you know." He laughed, raising his hand to his heart in an exaggerated gesture of feigned innocence, and she rolled her eyes dramatically, but clearly amused, before returning her attention to the matrons. "God help us when your son is born," Emery murmured, but he was smiling. "2 Montroses causing havoc in London. Or more, if it's a girl," Henry replied cheerfully. "Rosalind is already planning how she will raise a daughter even more scandalous than herself." Emery groaned. "I need a stronger drink." On the other side of the garden, near the main entrance, the butler Cornelius Ashworth watched the scene with an expression that, for those who knew him well, was practically effusive. The butler, or rather former Crown agent who had served openly as Ravensholt House's head butler for years, held an empty silver tray and allowed himself a rare moment of visible satisfaction. Mrs. Holloway appeared beside him, equally composed but with a gleam of approval in her eyes. "It was a long journey," she commented softly. "It was." Cornelius agreed, watching Henry and Rosalind, now reunited, he leaning in to whisper, something that made her laugh and lightly swat his arm. "But it was worth every moment of vigilance, every report sent, every night worried. They are happy. It was not a question. They are," he confirmed, and then, in a gesture completely out of character, he smiled. Small, discreet, but genuine. "And they will continue to be. I am absolutely certain." Mrs. Holloway nodded in approval before moving away to supervise the kitchen staff. Cornelius remained for another moment, watching the couple he had protected for so long, finally living the life they deserved. When Henry gently pulled Rosalind into an improvised dance in the garden, cautious movements considering her state, but absolutely passionate gazes, Cornelius decided it was time to return to work. But as he turned, he murmured to himself with quiet satisfaction, "Mission accomplished, my lord. Mission accomplished." And so, under colored lanterns and witnessing stars, to the sound of exotic music and the laughter of an enchanted society, Henry and Rosalind Montrose danced, not just with their bodies, but with souls finally at peace. The past forgiven, the present celebrated, and the future, with a child on the way and a love stronger than any adversity, shining brightly before them. Some stories take time to unfold. Some require sacrifice, patience, and unwavering faith. But when they finally reach their happy ending, they are the sweetest of all. Thank you for staying with me until the end, and for every comment, every like, every moment you spent with us in this story. What was your favorite scene? Tell me in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe for more exciting historical romances. Your participation is fundamental for our channel to grow more and more and take beautiful love stories further and further.